All right. Well, I guess this is a continuation of my time on the USS Ticonderoga, the mighty Tycho Tiger. It's a CVA class aircraft carrier from World War II that was still commissioned during the Vietnam War. I mentioned that when I got on the ship, I was with two other guys, and the clerk, the yeoman, came out and he said, "We need two guys for deck division and one guy for G." Well, deck division is all that painting and scraping and chipping and all that, and I said, "I'll take G." Of course, I was about 5'6" or 5'7", weighed about 140 pounds. And G division, as it turns out, that's weapons division. And my job, I was introduced to a bomb sled. It had like a little dolly, two-wheeled cart. You put two 500-pound bombs on there, and you pick up the ass end of it, and you push it from point A to point B, and to airplanes and everything else. And they were heavy. And at the end of the tour, I guarantee I could pick up the butt end of a Volkswagen and push it somewhere. But my day on the aircraft carrier started early. We worked 12-hour shifts, longer if they do it a resupply, because everybody had to churn out for a resupply. It's when another supply ship comes alongside, and they string lines back and forth and fuel hoses, and they would crate those bombs over, and we had to get them down into we'd break about the pallets and put them on the elevator and send them down to the storeroom down below. We had a little elevator over there which brought the bombs up from the armory, and my life during that 12-hour shift was governed by that elevator. It made a little buzz noise whenever it came up, and I was so tired I could fall asleep, and they'd be bringing jets down on the outside of the hangar bay on those elevators, and they're still burning off their fuel, so a lot of roaring wouldn't bother me a bit, but that little buzz of the elevator, I'd pop awake and run over there and start unloading bombs until we emptied the elevator, and they'd go back down so they could load it all up again. Now, dumb as I was, I know, like I said, we worked 12 hours. Now, you had a quick little break to run down and eat, and then get your ass back up there. And those guys were taking off, and they'd be gone 15, 20 minutes. I said, "Where the hell are they going?" "Oh, you get a smoke break too." I said, "A smoke break?" Well, the next time I was off shift, I went down to the ship store and I said, "I need a pack of cigarettes." And they said, "What kind you want?" And I said, "What's the longest cigarette you got?" And Pall Mall cigarettes, they were about that long. So I'm up there pushing bombs and everything, and came time, I said, "I'm going to go take a smoke break." And they said, "You don't smoke." I said, "I do now." And I went back, and everybody had to go to the fantail to smoke. And standing back there in the fantail, I lit that Pall Mall and like I died. I heaved and coughed and choked and sputtered and everything. And yeah, went back and went to work and everything and working my butt off. And I said, later on, a couple hours later, I said, "I'm going to go take a smoke break." All right. I went back there and I coughed and sputtered, and that went on for a couple of days, and finally I got that one lungful that got down there, and it took hold. And I smoked for the next 40 years, I guess. But while I was on the aircraft carrier, a couple of interesting things. Uh, you would go online off of Vietnam. They were flying missions. We had A4 Sky Raiders, which was a fairly small bomber jet, and it could only carry, so many bombs. And we had F8. I can't remember what the heck the name. They call them the last of the gunfighters, the fighter jets on there. And we had the old Sky Raiders, the old Spads, and anyway, I used to go up and I'd watch flight operations and everything. It was neater than heck watching those planes come in and land on that little deck at night. And you could go up on the bow. There was a bow rail. You could get up there, and when they launch those suckers right over your head, and it was really neat. But you'd be out, you'd go online for 26 to 28 days, and then you come offline to resupply. And either we went to the Philippines, which the time I was on there, the tour I was on there on Ticonderoga, we went to the Philippines 2 or 3 times, but we also went to Sasebo, Japan, Yokosuka, Japan, went to Singapore, which was when you go to Singapore, you cross the equator, and they have a little tradition in the Navy. It's called, you go from being a polywog to a oh, what the hell they call it? I still have my card, just in case. But they do an initiation ceremony, and it doesn't matter what rank you are. It's not just the lower rank. It doesn't matter. If you've never crossed the equator, you have to go through the ceremony. And like on the ship I was on, our executive officer, which is a very high-ranking person in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, he was just like the rest of us. Had his shirt on backwards, his pants on backwards, and getting the shit beat out of him by everybody and their coon dog brother. They had these little short pieces of fire hoses as you were going through the various exercises. You know, they start out the shellback anyway. They bring you out, they line you all up, nose to tail. You're all down on your hands and knees, and they bring you up on the hangar deck, and then they got everything laid out on the flight deck. All these different stations. You got to the real bad ones. You had to climb through a big slop chute full of puke and disgusting, rotten material. And of course, I wasn't the first guy through there, so as soon as you hit it, you throw up. It was absolutely horrible. And when you come out the other end, you know, they've got grease in your hair and all that. And meanwhile, they're wailing on your ass with these pieces of fire hose, you know, and they make you crawl up to, you got to kiss King Neptune's baby. They get the biggest, fattest bosun's mate they can find on the ship, and they rub grease all over his gut, and he's sitting there, and he's got a little crown on and a little Neptune. You got to go up to and request permission to kiss King Neptune's baby, and you got to kiss his belly button. And he grabs you with both ears and rubs it in his gut. And, I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting, and you're puking the whole time because it's stunk, and you're covered in, I don't know what kind of grease they use, but you're an absolute mess. Broken eggs, you know, just, and at the end of it, when you get down to the end, they hit you with a fire hose to kind of wash you off a little bit, you know, because I guess it was too dangerous of a place for us to go over the side and go swimming. Plus, the aircraft carrier, the deck's way the hell up off the water. But the neat thing about that was I was YouTubing, and I found a video of my shellback initiation on YouTube. And I watched it, and I said, yeah, they're beating the shit out of those guys. And I showed it to my daughter, and yeah, I told her about it. But when you go through that, you get a card saying that you're an honorary, you're a member of King Neptune's, whatever the hell it is. And I didn't keep a lot of things when I got out of the service. I got rid of it. I was going to be a hippie, and I divested myself of just about everything. But I kept that card just in case I ever cross the equator again. And my daughter, who I gave my Vietnam album to, has a few pictures and everything. That card's in that album. But it was a hell of an initiation ceremony. And I'm sure they still have the shellback initiation ceremony, but I'm sure that in this day and time it's been cleaned up quite a bit, and maybe not as abusive. But I was proud to have gone through it and be a member. I wasn't at the time, but it was kind of unique. The ship itself, I had a berthing compartment. You go down. They call them ladders in the Navy. They don't call them stairs. You go down a couple of ladders and you're in a berthing compartment. And there's a whole bunch of racks in there, and the racks folded up. It was just a frame. Had a real thin little mattress on it, and you drop your rack down, take your boondockers off and whatever you want. You climb up in that rack, and usually you didn't even strip down because you know they'd have fire alarms or fire drills during the night. You had to bail out and go to your battle station, and you didn't want to take a whole lot of time getting dressed. The shower, I don't know how many guys were in my berthing compartment. It had to be 20, 30. And we had 6 shower stalls, and only one had a curtain in it. It had a line outside of it. You guys trying to get a little privacy. But it was neat going to the Philippines. You get over there, and my first trip there, I looked across the harbor when we pulled in, and the USS Coral Sea, I think it was in there also. That's another aircraft carrier. Well, there was a guy from Woodsboro, Texas there, from my hometown, and that I knew, Johnny Carstead. He was in the Marines. And I said, man, I'm going to run by there and say hi to him. So I rode the cattle car all the way around the edge of that bay, got over to the Coral Sea, and saluted, and came permission to come aboard, and went aboard. I said, where are the jarheads? That's what the Navy Swabbies called us, the Marines. And I said, oh, I go through that hatch over there. They're down below. And I said, all right. And went over there and went down below, and bigger than life, there was Johnny Carstead sitting behind a desk. He was a Lance Corporal, and he was in charge of the brig. And we did the old hometown boy stuff there for a while, you know, and everything. He said, let me show you something. And poor sailors, if you got in trouble in the Navy on a ship, and an article, you know, non-judiciary punishment of any sort where they put you in jail, they'll put you in there for 2 or 3 days or whatever. Well, the Marines are in charge of the brig. And on the aircraft carrier, when I was out at sea, you'd see the Marines would bring the prisoners up and have them exercises on the hangar bay deck, doing all kinds of drills and crap and calisthenics and yelling at them and whacking on them with little nightsticks and stuff. And I said, I hope I never go to the brig. That old Carstead, he marched out some of the prisoners, and they had a little line on the deck, and line on the wall, and while they come marching right down that line and right up to the line in the wall, put the nose against it. The guy behind him put his nose in the back of the guy in front's head, and Carstead said, ain't that cool? We got them trained. And I said, what an asshole. But we met up, went into Olongapo, Philippines together, and got introduced to San Miguel beer, which will, when you're 19, you can get fired up on that stuff, but boy, it gives you the runs. And tried to enjoy the local life. And that's all I'm missing. Oh, I'll tell you another neat thing about Olongapo or the Philippines. When you first get in port, you have money. And even though money goes a long way in Olongapo, you run out of it. And when you start getting broke, well, instead of going into Olongapo and wasting your money, you go to Grandy Island, which was a Navy-run, they had concessions there, you know, they had tennis and, you know, a USO type deal. And I went over there, and because a beer was 10 cents, a hamburger was like 20. You know, I had no money for that. And they had a deal where you could get not scuba, but you could get a snorkel. And around Grandy Island were these reefs. And it was really neat. I was a good swimmer. I'd been a lifeguard a couple of years in Woodsboro. And so I got a snorkel and flippers, and I went out there and jumped in, and I started swimming around. And you'd swim along a beautiful coral. You know, it'd be about 2 or 3 feet below your chest, and all of a sudden it'd open up into a big amphitheater, deep water, you know, 20, 30 foot deep. And you'd see all these exotic looking fish, and I mean, it was just gorgeous. And I'm riding along, I was just having a good time swimming, and all of a sudden I looked over and I saw a shark. Now the damn shark was probably about this long. But when you're looking at something through a goggles underwater, they're magnified. And it looked like a great white to me, and I swear to God, I bet you I looked like a duck coming out of that water. I was swimming like hell getting back to shore. But I enjoyed Grandy Island, and Japan was neat. My impression of all the Asian countries, crowded, just people are jam packed. In Japan, it was they maintain. They're extremely polite to each other. You know, there's no rudeness whatsoever. But there's so many of them packed into these confined areas. You know, so you know they just all seem to be very very polite. Now in Japan, I did pick up one souvenir in Sasebo. When you went into port, all the other sailors on the other ships hated aircraft carrier sailors because there were so many of us on an aircraft carrier that when we hit port, all the prices went up for entertainment and everything because there were so many of us, and that just pissed the hell out of like the destroyer sailors and the cruiser sailors and the supply ship guys. You know, they were God dang, here comes the Ticonderoga. You know, all the prices, everything's going to go up. And Tycho Tiger's my butt. And well, you go out and go drinking. You go into a place and you know you go with 5 or 6 other guys. You know, you can go by yourself. And if you went into a place and say there's a bunch of Marines in there, and well, you better have a bunch of sailors, otherwise, you know, the Marines going to kick your ass. If you had enough sailors, you know, you have a kind of like a little standoff. Well, I mean, we went into this one bar, and there were some other Tycho sailors there. So, man, I thought, man, we're going to be in pretty good shape here. And some tin can sailors came in, and, you know, and they were grumbling and everything, and dirty looks going back and forth, and we didn't pay no attention to them. And then some more came in, and I said, oh, shit, we might have some, you know, there's a little eyeballing going on, and, you know, little snide remarks and everything. And, of course, these guys are all young dudes getting oiled up, drinking that good old Santori whiskey over there. Well, I had to go to the John. So I went back and I went into the John, and I was taking a whiz in Benjo ditch back there, and I heard the chairs scraping and a fight break out, and I said, yeah, dang. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be slick. I'm going to look out there, I'm going to find somebody swinging away, and I'm going to cold cock his ass. And the first guy that swings at me, I'm going to lay down on the floor and wait until they start hollering the shore patrol's coming so I can get up and run off with everybody else. Smart. So I get over there and I ease the door open, and I see a guy fighting a Tycho sailor right in front of the door there. I said, ha ha, I got his ass. So I stepped out, and I did about like that, and that's the last thing I remember. They tell me that when I stepped out the door, there was a guy standing to the right of the door, had a Akadama wine bottle in his hand. He just swung it up and hit me right in the chin, knocked my ass out, and I had a gash under here. I was sipping soup for about a week. I couldn't hardly talk because the stitches hurt so much. But that was my souvenir from Sasebo. But all in all, you know, they fed you good on it. They worked you. Sailors work. They work. And on our trip back to the States, what people don't know about an aircraft carrier, you know, they're great, big, and huge, and all that. And destroyers are smaller, and they can really speed and all this. Well, on a long run, when we got away from Vietnam and we were coming back, they decided we were going to drop our escort off, and well, the first thing they did, we had to get rid of our unused ordnance. So they flew the planes loaded with ordnance. We had a big bombing display and everything, and that was cooler now. And then we lit a shuck for Long Beach, and they opened that carrier up, and a carrier will move at top speed, and we outran our escorts, and we got into Long Beach, and we were going into dry dock, and I had applied to be in the Riverines, and went home on leave. And when I came back, I had orders to go to the Riverines. But anyway, that was my time on the Ticonderoga.